Today, we're diving deep into a topic that resonates with so many of us in the second half of our lives. It's about the journey of rediscovering our health, vitality, and the sheer joy of movement. Many of us have been on that roller coaster of life, juggling multiple responsibilities from work, taking care of our families, and managing our social lives. And in the midst of all this hustle, we often sideline our own well-being, promising ourselves that next week or next month or in the new year, we'll focus on our fitness, we'll lose that extra weight, or we'll regain that lost energy. But as the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months and sometimes years, we find ourselves trapped in a cycle of postponement and excuses. It's a story that's all too familiar, and yet it's one that can have a transformative ending. Our bodies, even in their 50s, 60s, and beyond, have an incredible capacity to heal, rejuvenate, and thrive. The key lies in shifting our mindset, in understanding that fitness isn't just about rigorous workouts and strict diets. It's about play, community, accountability, and most importantly, enjoying the journey. When we start moving with purpose and joy, energy flows naturally. And when we surround ourselves with a supportive community, that motivation multiplies. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm the founder of the Silver Edge, and our mission is to help you build and maintain a lean, healthy body that you love for the rest of your life, so that you can show up in the second half of your life as the healthiest, strongest, most vital version of yourself. If you're new here, I want to personally welcome you and thank you for tuning in. For those of you that have been around here for a while, welcome back. Today's guest is Kelly Howard. Kelly is someone who has lived this journey. She's faced the challenges and emerged stronger, fitter, and with a mission to inspire and guide others. She's a fitness consistency expert, author of the book Fit, Active and Ageless for Life, and she's the founder of the Fit is Freedom movement. Through her work, she has empowered thousands to prioritize their fitness and embrace new adventures in the second half of life. I started our interview by asking Kelly how she found herself in a fitness career.
So my story starts when I couldn't get out of bed one day. I was in so much pain. I literally crawled to the bathroom, laid on the floor, and the tragic piece was I was leading an outdoor activity company. So here I am. I'm telling people, that you got to be active, you got to take care of yourself, blah, blah, blah. And I am so stressed. I've got so much going on in my life that I'm not taking care of myself. And I'm just trying to dial it in on the weekends when I'm taking them on different events. And of course, by the time the weekend came around, I was back up. I was back out there doing all my things. And I was thinking about all the people I know that are in the same spot. Like we've been active in the past, a lot of us. And all of a sudden, our bodies are maybe not as happy about where they are right this second. And we're not changing the way that we're dealing with it.
How old were you when you hit that
I was
kind of, I couldn't get out of bed one morning?
let's see, I was probably about 53 at that point.
Okay. So at the time, obviously you had been fit and healthy before that because you said, hey, I'm working for this outdoor adventure company and I'm leading these outdoor events. Were you always fit and active? How does that look?
Yeah, I would say yes, with trepidation. I mean, I don't think of it as always active, but I was a sailboat racer in my 20s. I was a long distance skater in my 30s. I always went to the gym. Like I was the only girl at the gym when I was a kid. But at the same time, I wasn't I wasn't this big bodybuilder. I just went to the gym because I liked it.
Right.
And then when all of that stuff crashed, it was because I wasn't going to the gym. I was becoming a caretaker for my mother. I was like the general contractor for our house. I was starting a new company and I just put it all aside. It's like, let's just put all that over there for the next however long until I get back on track. And it didn't work so well.
Well, That's interesting. Our stories parallel a little bit there. I was in my, I don't know, to say I wasn't a beacon of health, but in my 20s and 30s, especially my 30s, I was into the endurance stuff. I was doing lots of marathons, tons of triathlons, things like that. In 40s, similar to you, I just my priorities shifted. I burnt out on all that endurance stuff. I quit cold turkey. And long story short, in my 40s, I was in the worst shape of my
Oh,
life.
wow.
I was still just, I ate like garbage before, but I got away with it because I was so active. And then just all of a sudden found myself very, very sick. And it was kind of a wake up call for me. You mentioned that, okay, all of a sudden real life starts to get in the way. You're a general contractor for your house. You've got this job, you got the family, you're a caretaker for elderly parents. Did you notice a slow decline in your health, or was it really just one day you got up out of bed and you couldn't move and you said, wait, how did I get here?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point because I probably didn't notice the difference, but what I did was I switched a lot of the things I'd been doing. I suddenly became more of an endurance athlete. Like I was always like the long distance skater. That's, endurance. But I suddenly started doing all the things that I needed to do for this company, like road bike. I was doing long road bikes and what I noticed were things were hurting more than they used to. And instead of doing the things I knew to do, I just figured, maybe it'll stop.
Ah, yeah.
Maybe that'll go away.
Right, right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think a lot of people listening can relate, right? Whether they were active or not active, just all of a sudden finding yourself in this place in your 50s or 60s of saying, wait, what's going, or maybe it's earlier, maybe it's your 40s like it was for me, of how did I get here? And is this the end? Is this inevitable? Is it
Yes.
all downhill from here? Right. That's a question many of us ask ourselves. We try and answer that every day or
Right? I mean, it
in this
really is.
business, right?
That's
Yeah.
it. That's the question.
Right,
Is it
that is the
over?
question. Is it
Yeah,
over? But you and I are gonna make a case that it, in fact, is far from over. Is that fair?
correct.
Okay. Now, all right. Well, Kelly, you are a fitness consistency expert. I've seen you market yourself that way. I love that tag. Tell us, what is a fitness consistency expert, and why did you choose that title?
I am okay. First, I have like no letters after my name. I am not a personal trainer. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I am none of those things. I am somebody who uses herself as a guinea pig to figure out what works and what doesn't. And then when I figure out things that might work, then I, drag my clients in and see how that's going for them. But where consistency came in was I would see so many people start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. It's the, first of the year, the first 3 weeks, people are on fire. I'd never go to the gym the first 3 weeks because it's crazy pants, right? By the 1st of February, it's my gym again. So it's I think that's the big problem is that people often thinks it's all or nothing. Go big or go home, right?
Yeah.
All these things that we hear where I think that really it's kind of like, start small, start where you're at, one step after another. All of a sudden you look back. Perfect example. I can tell a quick story. I'm talking to a client a couple of days ago. And so at first thing I say to her is like, how are you doing? And she said, I love my life. And I went,
Mm,
whoa. I said, well, that's powerful. And I said, by the way, a year and a half ago, you didn't love your life. Do you remember that? And she said, yeah, I have been remembering that. And that person was someone who had done start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. And I kept just saying, start small, take a step, keep on going. And one day you're going to look back and go, whoa, life has changed. That's consistency to me. It's not perfection. I don't believe in perfection. I mean, I have some friends that I guess are perfect. They're like the bodybuilders. They're on stage. They're like you look at them and I'm a little bit like, "Oh, wow, she looks really good." And that perfection works for maybe 1% of maybe a half a percent of the people in the world. The rest of us, I think it's just a matter of just get consistent, find things that work for you, change them when you need to.
yeah, I love that. We talk about on this show all the time that small steps, even tiny steps, when they're done consistently, can add up to potentially huge results, right? So big fans of that. But I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say every single person listening to this can relate to that start, stop, start, stop. We've all done that, right? Whether it's
Done
with a
it.
diet or an exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still do it from time to time. I start
Yeah.
things and I'd lose my motivation or my will or my drive, or real life gets in the way, or something happens, right? So that's just a normal part of, I think, just the human experience. But I love the way you talk about consistency as just these little small changes that we make over time. And it's a journey. We're not really arriving at any perfect state.
No,
So
you're right. It is a journey because if you think about it, if you're not training, okay. I have friends who are Olympians, right? And they train because that is their world. But for me, I'm not training for an Olympic gold. I'm training to be able to do everything I want to do for as long as I possibly can. That's kind of life. So why not just figure out what those things are that are going to work for you, do them, shift them, do more, shift them, and just keep going.
yeah, no, I love that idea that you're trained to do everything that you love for the rest of your life. And it was Dr. Jonathan Sullivan who mentioned something very similar in his book, The Barbell Prescription. He talks about those, and I think his audience specifically is over 40, but for us, over 50, over 60, wherever you are, we're training for something different than, say, the Olympian or the bodybuilder or any performance or aesthetic extreme. We're training for quality of life. We're training to not have that decline into feebleness, and to be able to do the things that we love to do for as long as we
Right?
can, right? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
powerful stuff. All right. Well, in your book, you talk about some consistency killers, and I'd like to briefly just touch on each one. The first one you mentioned is perfection. Why is perfection a consistency killer?
Because perfection isn't real.
Hmm.
Like, we can be perfect maybe for a day, but it's just like we were talking about, like, life happens. And when life happens, then your consistency falls off, blah, blah, blah. And if you're trying to be perfect, you give. You just give up. And I see it all the time. People will tell me, like, oh, well, I tried again, but man, it just didn't work. I'm like, so what? Just go do it again.
Yeah.
Right? When people put together a plan, like a fitness plan, I don't necessarily call them workout plans, but like a fitness plan, I always say that if you're perfect, like if you're hitting, well, let me back up a smidge. If you're hitting 80% of what you say you're going to do, fully on you, good job. If you're hitting 90, whoa, like you're a rock star. If you're hitting 100%, if you're perfect, you're probably not trying hard enough.
Hmm.
Probably need to change that plan.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
perfection
No, I'm
isn't
with you
real.
there. Perfection isn't real. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we could both agree that on that. Your next consistency killer is not anticipating roadblocks. What do you mean by that?
Life.
Yeah,
Right?
because we talked
Life
about real
happens.
life tends to happen, right?
It
Whether we
does.
like it
I
or
mean,
not. Yeah.
I just came back from a trip. It was an active trip, right? So I'm backpacking, but there's that travel on either side. There's that hanging out with my friends. There's all of that. So maybe we're backpacking for 4 days and we're traveling for 8. Did I do my weight? No, no, that didn't happen in that period of time. But I knew going in that it wasn't going to happen. So I didn't beat myself up. I just went, okay, life happens right here. Let's start over. Or, I mean, another example is like when someone has something that stops them physically, they get hurt, they have an operation, whatever it is, you've got to be willing to work with it.
Hmm. Yeah. Work with it, work around it. That's right. Yeah. Not
Yeah,
let it end up being an excuse to just stop, right? Again, going back to
right.
that on and off. All right. Your next consistency killer is going beyond your tipping point. What are we talking about here?
That can happen in a couple of ways. One way is that if someone pushes themselves too hard and they get injured, well, and it's right
Yeah.
back to where we were just talking about, right? You're going backwards. Or the other one is that when it becomes like this all or nothing, like this is all I can do. This is the most important thing to me in life. Everything else can just go to the side. You can do that for some period of time, but it's not sustainable. And I'm always looking for what's sustainable.
Right. Yeah, that long-term sustainability. I'm very fond of saying if you want permanent change, you're gonna have to change permanently. And that sets some people, diet culture doesn't condition us with that message. It says, hey, do
Right.
this odious task for 6 weeks and you're gonna
And
melt the fat
then you're
away. It's like,
fine.
and then you're done.
You're done.
Hooray.
End of
Yeah,
story.
congratulations. And the story. Yeah, that we know where that leads, right? So yeah, not so much. And you had mentioned because your fourth consistency killer is that all or nothing mentality, and that does seem to trip a lot of people up. They hit that first hiccup, they hit that first roadblock, or because they can't be perfect, they're like, okay, well, I just wasn't cut
Here
out
it
for
goes
this, or
again.
this. Yeah, here it goes again. And I
Mhm.
think that sets us up for a lot of times we're internalizing these, and I'm using air quotes for people in the that are listening to this, the failures, and we internalize these failures as our own failures, and this becomes this very unhealthy negative downward spiral. Okay, I failed yet another diet. That's not, there must be something wrong with me, right? That's kind of internalization. So
Right. So
not
true.
good stuff there. Yeah. All right, your fifth and final consistency killer. I love this one. It's your personal kryptonite. What are you talking about when you say your personal kryptonite?
So, kryptonite was the thing that just like stopped that superhero in their tracks. I think all of us have one,
Mm,
maybe multiples. If you said to somebody like, "What's the one thing that stops you from being as healthy as you want to be?" Or "What's the one thing that stops you from having what you want?" What's that one thing? Almost everybody can like drop it. They know what it is, but it's the thing that you don't really want to give up. It's often the thing that you use, right? You use to soothe. You use to care. It's like a self-care thing that isn't self-care.
yeah.
I do something frequently, not frequently. I do something sometimes called sugar freedom. And that is because sugar is one of those kryptonites for a lot of people. I mean, for me, my kryptonite, I like a glass of wine.
Yeah.
That's, if somebody would say, "What's your kryptonite?" I'd be like, "Oh, well, I typically have a glass of wine several evenings in a week. Do I need to stop that? Mm, I don't know." Like, I just did a podcast myself about like how much of the things do you want to stop doing? But if I wanted perfection out of what I was doing, that would be my kryptonite that I'd have to get rid of, right? So
Yeah.
we
So
all have them.
I'll have them. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I think alcohol is a pretty common one, right? That's
Yeah.
self-soothing. That's a way we unwind. We de-stress, things like that. Of course, we know that physiologically, alcohol
Right.
maybe
Right.
not
Of
serving us
course.
so well, but in a social setting, maybe not
Yeah. If
so
I go
not
out
so
with my
horrible.
friends,
Right, right.
yeah.
Time and a place for it. Yeah, I no, but I think that's a really interesting concept that we all have our own kryptonite, our own personal thing. And for, some of us, it's going to be different. Some of us are going to have multiples of those. And I think they sometimes can show up as excuses as well for why we don't do things. So maybe not so much the self-soothing, but, well, I will get around to talking about why people aren't choosing healthy behaviors, but
Yeah.
sometimes that kryptonite thing might fall into that as well.
It can. And I mean, just like the flip side of it's not just necessarily something that you're doing. Like it could be something you're not doing. Could be not
Mm,
sleeping,
right.
right? Like I have that
Yeah.
come up a lot of people be like,
That
"Well,
comes up
I'm
all the
really
time. Yeah.
busy.
Yeah.
I'm really
Super
busy.
busy.
I'll sleep when I
Don't have time.
retire."
Yeah.
No, you won't.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, let's shift gears a little bit here from kind of consistency and talk about our why. I think you talk about your knowing your North Star, this direction. Talk to us a little bit about what do you mean by know your North Star?
So a lot of times when I first speak with somebody who wants to work with me, they'll tell me why they want to get in shape. And it's usually an external that's not very sexy. I need to lose weight. I want to fit into my jeans.
Mhm.
I need to look good at the wedding, whatever it is, right? Those are so uninspiring. If they were inspiring, we would have done 'em a million years ago. So my idea is find the things that get you excited. Find the things that matter. I mean, a North Star for me. I love to kayak. It's a thing for me. So I know that in order to do the kind of paddling that I do, I have to be in the kind of shape I need to be in. So it's it's a driver, right? That's a North Star. And a North Star is a driver that creates passion in you. It's not a, "Oh, boy." It's not an Eeyore. It's a
Yeah.
s
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that most of our clients that come into our program are weight loss, right? When you say, well, what are your goals? The first thing will be, well, it's I want to lose weight. And typically somebody will have a what to me is a very random, arbitrary number, but it's a number that they weighed when before they got married, before they had kids, or when they were in college,
Mhm.
whatever, right? This is the I've weighed this before the pandemic, whatever. They have this arbitrary number, and you're right, that's not a very but usually when you peel back the onion, there's this concept of the 5 whys. You're probably very familiar with it, but you say, well, why is that important to you? And, the second level might be, well, I have these clothes. I don't get to wear them. I sure would like to fit into my clothes. Well, why is that important to you? And if the person you're speaking to is willing to be vulnerable, we start getting into some very real conversations very quickly. And it could be inspiring and something like you said, hey, my North Star is I love being physically active. I love being outdoors. And so I want to do the things that will allow me to do that. But for other people, it's, very often we're starting to dig into insecurities. Well, I don't feel sexy, or I'm ashamed to, when I go to the beach, I'm ashamed to take my shirt off at the beach, or I don't want to undress in front of my spouse. Things like we start getting into some pretty heavy topics sometime, as opposed to that other North Star of, well, I want to achieve this amazing thing, right? I want to compete in my first fill in the blank competition type thing when I
Yeah.
turn 60, that's pretty inspiring. But so is something like, hey, I just want to feel confident in my skin. I just want to show up as the best version of myself. I want to not be afraid to care for myself and to love myself and to have a healthy relationship with food, my body, things like that. How do insecurities fit into this North Star concept?
Mm.
Or do they?
They do. They do because, like, in my world, if you, like, people kinda are like, "You're a little bit of a Pollyanna, Kelly." And I am, right? I am. And I know that we are always either moving toward what we want or moving away from what we don't
Mm,
want, right?
yeah.
It's either, moving toward that thing that excites you and lights you up or moving away from the thing that's pain. And North Stars can be moving away from the pain too. It can be like a friend that I was with just recently. He said, I'm at an age where I feel like my timeline is ticking. I'm like, okay, it's the difficult conversations that you're talking about. And you're
Hmm.
right. Like for him, losing some weight gives him that health that allows him to go longer and further than, he might be if whatever. Um, I mean, a simple North Star for all of us is that if and this may not sound very Pollyanna, but the truth is that modern science, modern medicine is gonna keep us alive. That's its job.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter how we feel. We might be sick and in bed, and we still have a heart that's beating, or we might be enjoying ourselves. So, honest to goodness, that's a North Star, right?
Yeah.
So, it is all those things. It is. I mean, I do tend to wanna always be the, let's look for the unicorn, but sometimes you gotta look out
Sure.
for the crocodile.
Yeah, sometimes you got yeah, no, I love that. So you wanna chase the unicorn, but, watch out for the crocodile. I've not heard it put
Yeah.
that way. And I think what you're talking about, because modern medicine is certainly it's not making us healthier. Right?
Mm-mm.
I mean, if you have an acute injury or illness, we're going to put that aside. Certainly, we love Western medicine for that, but it's not making we're getting sicker and unhealthier, but we are living longer. So our lifespan is increasing, but our health span isn't necessarily increasing along with that. And the things that you're talking about, I think, fall more into that health span, right? It's not
Correct.
so much that I want to live to be 100, it's that I want to be strong, vital, capable, and like going back to what you said, I just want to do what I love to do for as long as I can do those things.
Right.
So how do we set up our lives for that? which I think brings us right back to your book again, where you talk about fitness is freedom. We talk about you have a fit, what is it? Your fit is freedom formula. Talk to us a little bit about what do you mean when you say fit is freedom?
Well, it's really what we just said. When you don't feel good, your life constricts.
Mm,
When you feel good and you can do the things you want to do, your life expands. And to me, freedom is oftentimes expansion. It's the ability to do the things you want to do. It's the ability to have fun with your family. It's the ability to have community. It's all those things. I mean, freedom, freedom's a funny word. Like we almost have this thought when we think about freedom is this, but when you start really writing down what does freedom mean to me, you'll notice that it means a lot more than just like this one little thing. Freedom is the ability, I mean, I'm putting words in other people's mouths, but it's the ability to do the things that you wanna do. And if we don't feel good, if we aren't fit, if we're not a sexy beast, right? Then our world starts constricting, it starts shrinking. And I don't want people to have a shrinking world.
okay, I love this topic. This is near and dear to my heart. I'm with you. We want to live large, not live small. And for most of us, our worlds shrink as our health declines. So the question I want to ask then is how do people like us, how do we not come across as that annoying fit person? How do we no, this is a serious question. I'm self-aware enough to realize that when as soon as I open my mouth around some of my peers who are not fitness fanatics, how I sound, right, to them. But how do we reach that audience that isn't maybe I mean, they're problem aware, but they're not sophisticated in that problem awareness. How do we speak to that audience who, there's this healthy at any size movement, there's this, this, hey, you're fat shaming. How do we speak to somebody like that in a way that resonates with them, that meets them where they are with this message that you and I are talking? Because if, look, you and I, we could have this conversation all day long and we're just going to be like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
We're feeding
People
off
be
of
like,
each
"Oh my
other.
gosh."
Yeah.
It's the
We're,
Kevin and Kelly show.
yes. And it's a bit of an echo chamber, which is a beautiful thing. I love that. But how do we take this conversation elsewhere? How do we take it where that conversation might not be as welcome or understood? How do we speak to this audience of people who aren't fit and just look at fitness as something that, you know what, I'd rather be sick and unhealthy than do what fit people do? How do we talk to those
Ooh,
people?
that's a tough one. Okay, what you just
Yes, it
said
is.
is the thing that makes my skin crawl, right?
Mm,
And makes me wanna cry because I I guess maybe I was just lucky. I had this mother who was quite the role model in a time when women weren't those fitness role models. So, like, if I complained about something not feeling good, my mother would just look at me. She'd take both of her feet, put them behind her head, and say, "You need to do yoga." Be like, "Oh, somebody get this woman out of my life."
mhm.
She was amazing. So it worries me when I meet people who feel like they they're okay. They're okay with things getting worse instead of getting better. Because I do always believe, like, I even if okay, can we be, like, two-sided here? Like, even if I know that things aren't going to always be better, I want to have the feeling that they can be. Because
Right,
when you have that feeling and that belief that it's possible, things become easier. When you're sure that it's not gonna work, then life starts shrinking. So
right,
having those conversations, um, I have to. I mean, I just always have to go back to what lights you up, right? Because if I can find something, however we're asking the why, if I can find something that lights somebody up, then I can give them options for how to get there. The 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 example that's going through my head right now is a friend who is older, older than me, which is getting older. But
Mhm.
he recently had some heart issues. And what he wants to do is just stop because he's afraid that too much movement is going to cause a problem. And my suggestion was, being somebody with no letters behind my name, talk to your doctor, but
Mm.
moving is probably going to make it better. So why don't we find the thing that you've always wanted to do and let's work toward that? Like, let's find something that, once again, I must be in that, must be the post caffeine haze here. I'm in that Pollyanna mode. I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
let's find that thing that's going to make you so happy and so excited that you're willing to try. Because if you're not willing to try, I can promise you things are going to start slipping pretty quick. It's different than it was 20 or 30 years ago.
It certainly is. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Let's say
Okay.
we find this person, right? And you say, okay, if I could just find what lights them up, if I could just give them this North Star, that we can put a framework in place to move them there in a sane, safe, wonderful manner, right? When that person turns to you and says, you know what lights me up is food, junk food. It gives me great joy to binge eat and emotionally because that's serving a purpose, not certainly not a physiological one, but it's serving an emotional purpose. Or what brings me great joy is just spending hours on end being very inactive gaming or binging TV shows. What do we say? How do we respond to that? Because clearly there are people that are getting what they perceive to be it's
You're right.
pleasure. And it might be a temporary happiness even, and it's probably masking pain or what. I don't want to get too deep into that, but there's a lot of reasons why people have unhealthy behaviors, even and they even know they're unhealthy, but continue doing them. What do you say to? I mean, how do we get that person from a North Star of, what really makes me happy is a pint of ice cream before I go to bed to, wow, I'd really like to go and be able to healthy enough to walk through the entire Smithsonian Museum or whatever, right?
Mm, okay. That's an interesting one. I mean, what runs through my head immediately is, well, you can lead a horse to water. Um,
Yeah,
right?
and
Like,
sadly
and
that there's some truth to that, right?
there
It's
is.
not up
I
to
have
you and I to decide what's best or
for everyone.
right, right. Get it.
Yes. I
Sure.
mean, and
Yeah.
I have occasionally had a client that I'm just like, I'm sorry, but I I don't think I can help you.
Mm,
Like, it happens. It happens very rare, but it does happen. But then I guess that's when you just have to find the pain that is so bad that they need to run from it, right?
yeah.
And it's knowledge. A lot of times it's knowledge. Do you know what that quart of ice cream is actually doing to you? Let's look at it. Like, let's really look at it. Instead of, let's look for the unicorns, let's look at that crocodile because that
Mm,
is what's going to do it. And are you willing? Like, are you really willing to have that be your next 25 years? Because you're going to stay alive, most likely, because medical science is really good.
yeah.
Um, so,
It's
I
just
mean,
that living smaller and smaller and smaller as the
right.
years go by, as the health
And feeling
deteriorates. Yeah.
worse and worse and
Feeling
worse.
worse and worse and worse. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I didn't expect an answer that's going to solve this for us, but it's something that I think about all the time.
Yeah,
You and I are entrepreneurs. We have businesses. We have to market our services, which are health and wellness services. And I'm, I feel like I'm very confident, competent, and I can spread my message to people who are picking up my vibe. But where I'm constantly challenged is how do I address the people who are not on my wavelength at all? Because those are really the people that think have the most to gain from
mm,
a this perspective shift. And yeah, like I said, I don't know that we're gonna
yeah,
solve this in an hour-long podcast, but I think it's worth picking apart. I think it's worth discussing and thinking about.
it
Um,
is. It is
yeah,
because all of us, and maybe it's not a kryptonite, but all of us have things that aren't great, right? And if you
yeah,
talk about this, you also have to talk or have to, you don't have to, but looking at the things in your life that could improve. It's the same thing. I
sure,
mean,
sure.
there's always space for improvement.
Well, yes, no matter where you are, we
Yeah,
alluded to the perfection and the journey, and there's always room in that. And I personally, I thrive off of striving, having this goal, meeting it, and then okay, what's next, right? That's personally what winds me up. But going back to our case of the people who are maybe are not on or way back on the health and fitness journey, it seems to me that there's this prevailing thought of I don't want to do what it takes to be healthy and fit because it's horrible. I don't want to live
it's
in the
too
gym.
much.
I don't want it. It's overwhelming. Yes. How do we address that?
Maybe that goes back to the very beginning of what we were talking about, those little bitty
Yeah.
steps. And most people that we probably speak to, both of us, are people who are driven more, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're driven. And driven people don't want to hear take small steps.
Right.
What do you think about when someone tells you to take small steps?
Yeah. No, I
I think that's for somebody else.
right. I'm ready to smash through a wall.
Right?
I don't know,
Yeah,
small
I'm
steps.
all
Yeah.
in. But the truth is that, those little steps and it doesn't even have to be health, right? It could be
Mm-hmm.
anything. When people want to start if you want somebody to start meditating, it's like, don't start with a 30-minute meditation, you will never
Right.
do it again.
Right.
Deep breathe for 5 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever. So it's the same thing, right? Like, what are those little teeny weeny steps that if somebody was willing to do, maybe it's instead of a quart, it's a half a quart,
Yeah.
right? When we're talking about ice cream. Or maybe it's take all the ice cream out of the house and replace it with, I don't know, something else. It's just like finding the littlest steps. It works both ways,
Sure.
right? Like a North Star is the big thing,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also the little teeny weeny steps. They
Yeah.
both work.
Right. No, I'm 100% with you. I think what
Yeah.
you're describing there is meeting people where they are. It's funny, when I started as a nutrition coach and a personal trainer, I was much more hardcore. I was very much in
I
somebody tell
can
me they
see
didn't have
that.
enough time. "Yeah, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. You're just not prioritizing." And I came across this way and I'd hear other fitness people say, well, it's important to park your car far away and get those extra steps. That's ridiculous. You need to hit the
Right?
gym. And I've I'm telling you, I have come a long, long, long ways from there. I'm a much kinder and gentler coach these days. But I found the power because what I was doing was all of my hardcore fitness friends were like, "Yeah, you're right." I was posting shirts of me with my workouts with my shirt off. And hey, if you want to be ripped and cut, you got to do this. And the people who that resonated with were people who were already healthy and fit. It wasn't
Right.
resonating with, Mrs. Jones, who's 60 years old and has struggled with, she's had this horrible maybe checkup and she's now found out she's, just got all these metabolic derangements and is now interested in changing. I don't resonate with her. But if I can meet her where she is and say, oh, you can't do 3 1 hour long workouts a week, could you do 2 15-minute workouts a week? And the old
Exactly.
me would be like, that's useless. 2 15-minute workout. What does that mean? If you drink 10 sodas a day, can you drink 9? Could you replace one of those with water? That's back to that. It's progress. It's those small steps. And I think that's the solution there, right? Is finding that person. What can we change? If you're willing to change even just a tiny bit, because in my experience, when you get people to do those small, tiny steps, they kind of build on each other. Healthy
They
habits,
always build.
if you could just get them to do it long enough, these habits they kind of stick and you're like, oh, you know what? I feel like I have a little more energy. Oh, I feel like my mood's a little better. Maybe I'm sleeping a little better and you progress. And now all of a sudden we're throwing in some other healthy elements and golly, my libido's improved. And just people are starting to ask me, hey, are you losing weight? And maybe the scales hasn't even budged, but you've built a little bit of muscle and you're just a little more confident in your movements. So I think that, yeah, there's a case to be made, certainly, to not be quite so hardcore as fitness people and to speak with love and just integrity to people who maybe they don't hold our worldview. It's easy for me to be excited about fitness and nutrition. I do
Right.
it every day. It's what lights me up. But I have to understand that not everybody's that way. So, Kelly, this leads me right into where I wanted to go next. Sorry for just babbling there for a few minutes, but I want to talk about motivation and its role in starting and sustaining a fitness journey. Talk to me a little bit of what's your take on motivation?
Mm. My take on motivation is that it's a learned behavior. I hear so often people will say to me, "Well, I'm not motivated like you. I don't have the drive like you."
Hmm.
I'm like, "But I I mean, no. Motivation is a learned behavior." It's like willpower, right? Willpower, they always say that, willpower runs out. Quite frankly, motivation probably runs out quicker unless you learn it. That's where
Hmm.
consistency comes in. Like, the more consistent you are, the more motivated you become because you're just doing the thing.
Yeah.
And motivation comes in a lot of different levels, right? Like, motivation is external and it's internal. I use both. Like, I will trying to think of a good example. So, I'm not wanting to work out, right? I'm like, I don't really feel like it today. But the first, like, lowest level of motivation, it's on my schedule. It's on my wall where I can see it. And so I'm like, well, okay, maybe that's good enough. Maybe it isn't. If it's not good enough, then maybe my next piece of motivation is external. I listen to something that inspires me, right? Maybe I listen to a coach. Maybe I listen to a podcast, whatever it is. Usually, right there between those two things, it's enough to me like, get your butt up and go do the thing, right? But if that's not enough, then I have to, like, reach out. That's where accountability comes in. Do I need to reach out to somebody and go, "Hey," like, I have somebody in my world who we're kinda like, not salt and pepper, more like oil and water. So, that's the person that if I need that quote unquote motivation, I reach out and I'd be like, "Hey, I need to get this gym workout done by 4 today." And she's on me, right? She's like, "Yeah, okay."
Right.
And then bottom line, it really comes back to me. But sometimes you have to have some external motivation.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny. I say all the time that motivation is a fickle friend, right? It's motivation's fantastic because it starts, let's face it starts most fitness, health, wellness type journeys, right? I'm motivated either for some positive thing, yeah, this is the year I'm gonna let's get in shape. Or, oh my God, I just got back from the doctor. This year's physical was horrible. I've got, he said make some changes. So we have these different kinds of ideas, but you had alluded to earlier just we know as coaches, right? January and February are our two best months. January, because everybody's starting a New Year's resolution. And you know why? Sadly, you know why February is a great month for coaches? I know you do.
Yes,
It's
everyone
because
quit it.
everybody quit. And they're like, oh my God, I made that resolution. I went to the gym 4 times and I didn't. Dang, I need to get back. So you're kind of getting those rebounders in February. But those are people that it's a good, I just bring that up because it's a great illustration of motivation. Motivation is great for getting us started, but for that long-term sustainability of any new lifestyle changes, I love the way you describe motivation as you talk about it. Hey, this is a learned behavior. In fact, in your book, I think you have 13, 12. You have a bunch of different ways to kickstart or to keep
Right, all the
motivation
little
to
tools.
right, all the little tools, right? How do we learn motivation as a behavior? And you gave a couple great examples right there, right? First, it's on. I've got it blocked. I do time blocking. That's first level. Second level is, hey, or maybe I have accountability with a friend, a buddy system. But I absolutely love that. So we've got somebody now. We've talked them into. We've got them to drink the Kool-Aid. They're like, okay, you annoying fit person. I agree. I'm ready. I'm in. I'm going to make some healthy, positive changes. They're motivated. They're ready. I think you have 4 fitness pillars. You talk about movement, food. They're basically my pillars. They're probably all
Right.
holistic
There's
nutrition. You're right. It's gonna
right.
be it's gonna be movement. It's gonna be fuel. It's gonna be sleep. It's gonna be de-stress. Let's pick each one of those apart. When we say the first pillar is movement, what are we talking about?
So, I believe that people have to start where they're at. So, an example is that I think in the book we have a quiz that gives them 3 different levels. What's your level? If you start at a level 3, but you haven't been doing anything for forever, you're level 1, you're gonna get hurt, you're gonna get discouraged, you're gonna burn out. immediately, and that's done. So you got to start where you're at. And flip side of it, if you're a 3 and you started at 2, you're going to be bored, done, out. So start where you're at with your movement. I like a mix in movement, like you do too, right? You've got to have some mobility, and mobility is nothing more than making sure the joints are happy, really. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you remember all the years when people would be like, "Oh, you got to stretch, but do you stretch before or do you stretch after?" Just warm up the joints and be done with it.
Yeah.
You need some cardio. And tragically, you have to have some resistance. And I say tragically
Yeah.
because a lot of the people that I work with, I mean, I'm one of them, they're cardio addicts,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yep.
I mean, send me out for a 5-hour hike and I am a happy, happy camper. And if you tell me that I can't do well, not that I can't do, but I shouldn't do 5 hours every day, A, I don't have the time, but B, it's not good for my body. And now I've got to replace some of those hours with resistance. There's resistance, right? But you
Right.
got to figure it out. So, yes, I think we have to have those movements.
And just to be clear, when you say resistance, you're talking about strength training,
Strength,
aka
strength
most
training.
normally
Yeah,
that's
because
going
if
to
I
the
say
gym and
strength
lifting weights.
training, yeah,
Right.
then people are like,
Well,
I don't like the gym.
right. And a lot of okay, so there's a couple things I want to unpack here. So yes, so ladies may hear that and think, barbells, gym, or that might over 50 demographics, the gym, huh? Because it's intimidating. Let's face it, there's all these young people, the music's probably blaring, and you've got the ladies in skimpy booty shorts and the big buff guys are they're making mean grunty faces while they work out. That could be intimidating to going back to our example of 60-year-old Mrs. Jones who's just trying to get back into shape. But it's critical for those of us over 50 to stave off the sarcopenia, the osteopenia, and we're talking about age-related muscle loss, age-related bone density loss. And we build that type of muscle and bone density through this resistance training. Unfortunately, we're building a little bit of muscle when we do cardio. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but we have type 1, type 2 muscle, or you may have heard that as fast twitch or slow twitch muscle. But when we talk about staving off age-related muscle loss and bone density, what we're talking about is the kind of muscle that you get when you are resistance training. And that's also what really stokes our metabolism, right? So for those,
Mhm.
when we're working with the older people, the more muscle mass you carry on your body, the more calories you're going to burn even at rest. Now, my question to you, Kelly, is what about the lady who's like, she's your classic cardio bunny, and she's resistant to maybe lifting weights? What do you tell her? How do we overcome that?
Well, I start with that is what's going to make you lose the weight,
Yeah, there you go.
right? It really is.
Right.
I mean, that's just it. And for myself, during COVID, my gym shut down for a couple of years, and it took me a while because I was dealing with stress in my own little way, which is like, riding my bike for hours. It took me a little while to go, wait a second, Kelly, you're putting on weight for the first time in a very long time, and you know why, because you're losing muscle that you used to have.
Yeah.
So that's like the first piece is you're going to lose weight. Um, the other piece is that you'll be able to, if you're like really are a cardio addict, you're going to be able to go longer because you've got your muscle foundation. If you don't have your muscle foundation, you're just going to burn it. So those are probably the two pieces that I like really drill into people. And quite frankly, you're going to be happier because your hormones are going to be happier.
Sure. Yeah, we're gonna set up that youthful hormone profile by specifically strength training. I love that you just lead out with a very, very simply, look, here, Mrs. Jones, you said your goal is to lose some weight. Lifting weights will be the best way to help you sustainably long term have this weight loss mission that you're working for. Yeah, so I know in our practice 100% of our clients do some form of resistance training. Now, we meet people where they are. So for some people that could be body weight, it could be machines, it could be bands. But for others, we have some pretty beastly 50, 60, and 70-year-olds in the program, and they're hitting the gym and they're swinging some pretty heavy weights around. But there's clearly I like that you talk about, we need this mixture of modalities, right? We want to have this mobility practice. We want to have some sort of a cardio practice, and we want to have some sort of strength training. Absolutely love that. All
Yeah.
right. So let's spend a couple minutes on your second pillar. Let's talk about nutrition. So what are some key takeaways that we need to put in place in order to have this fit freedom that we're looking for?
Well, okay, this is something I've learned, and I've learned it the hard way. I have been a vegetarian, almost vegan, almost my entire life,
Mm,
since I was about 20. I got away with it. I was one of those people who could always put on muscle. Like, I just have that physiology until I couldn't.
yeah.
And so I have become a convert. I'm still a vegetarian, but I'm a vegetarian who eats a lot of protein however I get it, because I've really learned the difference between, um, not taking in the protein and what it does for our bodies. So I'm sure that you know these things.
Mm,
I tried to avoid them for an extraordinarily long period of time. Vanity finally got me, quite frankly. I noticed that my skin was going bad quick, and that's what, got it. So I'm a convert. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but it happens to be drinking the Powerade or whatever it is.
yeah.
So first, I always ask my women to really up their protein. Another thing that I have learned is that, and I deal mostly with women, not exclusively, but mostly. Another thing I've learned is that oftentimes women, as we get a little bit, let's call it over 50, we quit wanting protein. Like the desire for it starts waning. So that's one of them that I ask them to look at. I also ask them to look at their sugar. I'm not anti-sugar. I'm not. But I do know that we get a lot of sugar in our food, however we're getting it. And sometimes, like I have somebody that comes to mind immediately. She was like, "I'm fine." And I'm like, "Okay. What's going into those smoothies you're drinking 3 times a day?"
Mm,
"Fruit. They're fine." I said, "Can we unpack that?" No. Finally, 3 months into it, when she's not losing an ounce, we unpack it, and we realize that she's knocking back, I don't even remember, 50, 60 grams of sugar per smoothie,
yeah. Not hard to
right?
do. Yeah.
It's super easy.
Hmm.
Like, you
And
have to
delicious.
become right? Well, that's
Yeah.
it. That's the next piece, is that
Yeah.
sometimes you have to be willing to eat utilitarian,
Yep.
and people don't like that idea, but, some food just has to be food for nutrition, not because it tastes good. I mean,
Right.
I would
Yeah.
cry if I could never eat pasta again in my life, but I eat it a whole lot less than I used to.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and then, I mean, I guess the last piece of nutrition that people really, for some reason, don't like, which I find crazy, is the vegetables. Like, bring in those vegetables. Just bring them in, eat them. There's lots of ways to get them into your body. They're important.
Yeah. They're my kryptonite, by the way.
Are they?
So yeah, I'm all the
Well,
time. I'm making fun of myself. I'm like, I am the nutrition coach who does not like to eat vegetables. But to your point, I do. It's not that I don't, but I have to make myself eat them.
right?
Fortunately, I'm married to a wife who her favorite food is vegetables, which I can't even understand that. But there's
What is
always
wrong with you?
exactly, but there's always plenty of vegetables around. That's not my problem. It's just actually getting them into my body. But I love that you start with protein. That's one of the places
Yeah.
we clearly start. Look, if you want to change, especially somebody over 50, but really anybody's body composition favorably, the two things that you could start with, actually, they're going to be the four pillars we're getting ready to talk about right here. But to
Okay.
even simplify it even further, it's strength training, some sort of resistance training, and it's up your protein. We always
Mhm.
like to say the formula, you should aim for somewhere between zero point 0.7 and 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So if you weigh 180, but you think your ideal body weight should be 150, 110, 120 to 150 grams of protein a day, which is a lot for people who
It
aren't
is a lot.
used to eating that much protein. They're often very surprised by that. And then, of course, that second thing is once we bump up the resistance training, bump up the protein, And then to your point, if we can couple that with reducing our total sugar intake, and get some of those phytonutrients into us through all those veggies, we're hitting on all cylinders there.
You can't even say the word.
What vegetables? I stumble over it, don't I? Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. Not a fan, people. I'm not going to lie. Uh, yeah. Why can't steak have all those same
Right. Well, they
phytonutrients
do. I
that
mean,
vegetables have?
they eat it, so it must be in there
Right.
somewhere.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, there is the carnivore diet, and that is their logic there. So more power to them. All right, let's move on to this might be my favorite subject. I really think it's the foundation of over 50 health. Why sleep? Why is sleep one of your major pillars?
Oh, man. Well, it's just so fun.
It
Like,
is,
sleep
isn't
is
it?
so good for you,
I
right?
used to think sleep was the most boring thing in the world. Why do we even have to sleep? I'm in love with sleep.
Sleep. If you want to lose weight, sleep more.
Yeah.
Right? And if you
Yeah.
don't believe me, just try it. It's it gives for people who say they're not motivated, do a test. Have a day that you don't sleep well or you choose to not sleep, and then just put it side by side to a day that you have a good sleep. You will find that on those days that you have had good sleep, you have more motivation. I mean, it may be a learned behavior, but it's still a behavior that is easier to sustain when you've had a good night's sleep. Sleep makes the difference between yes and no, really. Sleep makes a difference between, I mean, you're an athlete, like you did all the long distance stuff, and like the difference between having a good night's sleep and going out and doing a triathlon and having a bad night's sleep. I mean, that used to be, I never did Ironman, did shorter ones. I figured that was my superpower,
It is.
was I could sleep the night before an event. And
Mm-hmm.
all these other people are walking around like zombies, and I'm like, I feel great.
Yeah.
Sleep matters, and it's also so good for your brain,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, it's just so good for your brain. And I use a sleep tracker. I use an Aura Ring because I think that's my sleep tracker of choice. I think sleep trackers are really good because we should talk about tracking too. But sleep trackers are really good because they allow you to see what's going on with a caveat. The caveat is if you have terrible sleep and watching how terrible your sleep is makes you more stressed,
More
get
anxious.
rid of the
Yeah.
tracker.
Right.
Like, I had someone who came to me one time. She paid to be a full, one-on-one client, top dog dollars. She said, I can't sleep. I had an operation. She was a big athlete. I had an operation. I'm not sleeping well. It's driving me crazy. I said, take the tracker off. She's like, I can't do that. And I went, you have to take the tracker off.
Yeah.
And a week later, she said, guess what? Thank you. I'm the quickest client you've ever had. I finally did what you said, and I don't care anymore. I'm feeling better already. Just know yourself enough to know if that tracker matters or not. But in the end, sleep is probably going to be the thing that is the game changer for most of us.
Isn't that
It
funny?
just,
Yeah.
right?
It seems a little, it's not intuitive, I think, when you think, I want to lose weight, or I want to build muscle, or I want to be strong enough to do these long hikes or triathlons, whatever it is. But that sleep really is that. If there was a magic pill, that's it, right? Is really dialing in that healthy sleep. I think is so critical. It's like the tide. When the tide rises, all the boats rise up.
Right.
Sleep is that thing. And it's very closely related to your next pillar, your final pillar, which is stress management. Talk to me a little bit. What's so bad about us being stressed all the time, and what's so great about us being able to manage that stress in some sort of way?
Well, I mean, there's one good thing that happened during COVID. Everybody was super stressed. They put on weight. They created clients. Right?
COVID did
Like,
create clients.
not to
Yeah.
be evil,
Yeah.
but it's true.
Hmm.
It's true. If there was one thing that people saw, I think the easiest thing that the people I work with saw was the correlation between stress and gaining weight, stress and belly fat, because that's what stress does to us. Like, and when we're constantly in that mode where we can't turn it off, it's taken everything else down. So I think that, wow, like if you were gonna say, "What's the most important pillar?" That's probably it, because it's going to lead to the cascading effect of good for all the others,
Right.
but it's the last one anyone wants me to talk about, especially if I say the M word. They're like, "I don't meditate."
Yeah.
Great, then don't meditate, but do something.
Yeah. So I'm with you. A lot of people have tried meditation, they're turned off by it, but there are other practices, right? There's prayer, there's journaling, there's gratitude practices. There are now people, there's actual hard science around doing what they're calling microdosing meditation, where you're literally taking 15 seconds and putting your attention to something that brings you joy or happiness or love and just breathing in that space. There's breathing techniques. There's a lot of ways that we can manage stress. And like, look, most of us, we can't control stressors. We can't control world events and politics and all the craziness that's happening around us, but we can control, certainly to a degree, how we respond to that stress. And that's what's critical. And there is this inverse relationship between stress and sleep, right? If you're in this state of chronic stress, most of us are, then it's going to negatively impact your sleep. So figuring out a way to manage the stress, improve the quality of sleep makes everything else better, everything in your life.
Y it does, and there's to your point, there's one thing that I've started using, like, I tend to be very, I use lots and lots of software in my world, right? Like, technology is my thing. But when it comes to, like, de-stressors, I'm a pen and paper, let's just meditate by, looking at my belly button kind of person. But that doesn't mean that there's not a million great apps out there
Mm.
that if somebody says, "Hey, I can't do that," there's something I use called Brain Tap. And I mean, I use it because they asked me if I would test it, and I did it. It's like this thing you put on your head, and it's got all the lights and the little music and everything else. It puts you into a great state. There's heart math. There's all these things that you can do. That doesn't mean that you have to be the person who just sits there and you're responsible. You are, but you're not responsible for where your brain's going, because
Mhm.
that's what people don't like about meditation, is that they can't control their thoughts. So there's a million things out there that you can use.
Yeah, there's some great technological tools, 100%. All righty. Well, Kelly, as we're wrapping up here, I want to finish with this. We've talked a lot about all the things that are near and dear to my heart, right? The working out and the managing your sleep and your stress and the dialing in your nutrition, motivation, all this wonderful stuff. But we really haven't talked much about adventure, and you are a pretty adventurous person. Talk to us a little bit about the role of adventure in your life, especially as you age, and how you see that unfolding.
Ooh, there you go. There's a terrifying thought. So,
Right.
okay, and I will have to be the first to admit that, right? I had this conversation with a friend the other day. Do I have a timeline? Right? Do I have a timeline? She had just interviewed a woman who was 78 or 80 or something who had summited Mount Rainier. And I'm like, yeah, that's the
Mhm.
kind of things I need to hear. So, how does it play out in my life? First, I didn't know I was really into adventure. Like, I had lots of things that I like to do, but none of them were like, I want to go out in the woods or I want to go run a river or things like that until a few years ago. And when I say a few years ago, call it 15 years ago is when I really started getting into some of these things. And they struck a note. I mean, they struck such a note for me that it has become how I created my life because I want to be able to go do them. It matters to me. So, knowing those things, I'm always looking for things that push me a little bit. I think that's a good behavior for us if we can push ourselves a little bit past our comfort zone. So I try new adventures a lot. And I also know that there are those come tos, those no fail adventures, like good hiking trips, getting on a stand up paddleboard and enjoying the day on a rip or on a lake, like those kinds of things. So the way adventure works in my life now is that I do a lot of retreats with adventure. Because, and there's a reason for that. It's not just because it's fun for me, because it is fun for me, but it's also I get to see what happens when someone goes from coming back. That now in my retreats, it's always women. So most women, not all, but most women have this thought, I don't want to hold people back. I don't want to be the slow one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they don't get to go and do these things that they want to do, or that kind of like calls them a little bit in their head. So if I can get someone to go from, I don't want to hold people back to, I really want to try this, and then they do it, it is a game changer. It is a life changer. Like it is a complete changer in the world. And what happens then is that the world opens up. So when someone gets to do that, the world changes. A perfect example. I had I took a lady on a trip with me. We went to the Smoky Mountains. She was worried. I don't want to hold people back. I don't want to be the slow one, blah, 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 right? And she's never the slow one because I always have someone behind. I always hire someone to be in the back. So you're never the last person. And now that particular person just came back from going on a trip to, where was it? Alaska. It was a hiking trip. She showed me pictures. Holy moly, they were climbing mountains, like they were climbing mountains, big mountains, and life-changing. She's made more trip plans in the future. I had a lady that came to one of my events once. She showed up, she got out of her car, she had a cane. And I mean, people come to the things I lead and in person, and they've got hiking poles, but I've never had somebody with a cane before. And I thought, So she said, I'm not going to go with you. I just wanted to prove to myself that I would come to the parking lot. But next time, maybe I'll go for a walk. Shit, wrong person to say that to.
Right.
I'm like, nope, you're coming with us. And we did. I mean, it was hard for her, super hard for her. But she did it. Everyone helped her. Like, it was brilliant. She was just beaming when she got finished. It was a perfect story that doesn't end there. A few years later, she sends me a picture. She's at the trailhead for, I think it was Yosemite Falls, which is a tough hike. Like, I know this one. I've done this one. She sends me the picture. She's getting ready to take her friends up there, and she is traveling around the country hiking. That is a life-changing opportunity for somebody. And if I can do that, oh man, I mean, like, I'm done. I'm just super happy, and I just won the lottery.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. I love the idea of adventure as it's going back to what we were talking about. Your world can either get smaller as you're aging, or it can get bigger. It can get better. It can get richer. It can be fuller. And clearly, when you talk about those sorts of experiences that people are having, you can see the world changing for them. So literally life-changing events. And I hadn't really thought about it, but I suppose that if you're someone who leads these adventure trips, that there would be the psychology of, ooh, I don't want to do that because I don't want to hold the group back, or I'm not sure I'm physically capable of doing that. And meeting that goes back to, how do we speak to this different audience who's maybe not, maybe a little further back on this fitness journey? Absolutely love using the, adventure as that vehicle there. And clearly I could tell as you speak, watching you, that's what lights you up, what makes you passionate.
It does.
Drives
It
you.
does. I mean, we actually have a whole program called Adventure Fit that takes someone from, where they are today to the level they want to be, because it matters.
Love it. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
All right, Kelly. Well, as we're wrapping up here, how can people connect with you? How can they learn more about you, potentially join you on your next adventure?
Easiest way is just the website, which is nothing more than fitisfreedom.com. At fitisfreedom.com, you find me, you find all the social links, you find retreat information, everything. And you can find the book.
Yes. Okay. So, folks, I'm going to put all of Kelly's information in the show notes there. I'll put all her social media stuff in there. That book, again, is Fit, Active and Ages for Life. Fantastic book. Strongly recommend you grab it. It's got these great little quizzes after each chapter, and you're self-ranking yourself on each thing that she's breaking down for you. Let's see, Kelly, you've got a podcast. It's Fit is Freedom, got the website, all that good stuff. So we encourage you guys to go and check Kelly out. Kelly, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, sharing your passion, your wisdom, your knowledge with us. I think you are a fantastic ambassador for healthy aging. And really just encourage you to keep up the great work.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to everybody listening.
Okay, that's our show for today, folks. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I want to let you know that we have other free resources over at silveredgefree.com. There you'll find our free guides with our top tips on nutrition, exercise, and healthy lifestyle to assist you in your weight loss and fitness journey, so feel free to head over there and download anything that looks useful to you. I'll put links to everything we talked about in the show notes, and you can find those over at silveredgefitness.com/228. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in two important ways. The first is to tell a friend about this podcast and encourage them to give it a listen. The second is for you YouTube folks to click the like and subscribe buttons, and for you podcast folks to consider giving this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. And please be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss any future episodes. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today. And until next time, stay strong.